Today we will cover two horrifying caving stories. In the first, two divers find themselves swallowed by a maze of silt, disoriented, trapped, and fighting for every breath.
The second story is far more devastating than the first. As always, viewer discretion is advised. May 11th, 1990. Deep in the wilderness of Hernando County, Florida, the waters of Deep Sink No. 2 rested silent, hiding one of the most dangerous underwater cave systems in the state. Few divers had reached its limits, where darkness consumed everything and the crushing weight of the abyss pressed against the body. At the water's edge, Michael Spears checked his gear one last time, tightening each strap and inspecting every hose. At just 25, he was confident and eager, though far less experienced than his partner Daniel. Michael had earned his cave diving certification only 5 months earlier, but he had already logged 75 dives. The world beneath the surface fascinated him. Tight passages twisting into endless stone corridors, vast chambers opening like hidden cathedrals. That night, Michael and Daniel prepared for a descent into the lower circuit of Deep Sink. Visibility was poor, the rains had clouded the water, but the danger only fueled their determination. Michael had never entered this site before, and the challenge thrilled him. He wanted to prove he could handle the depths like the veterans he admired. Just a few feet away, Daniel prepared his equipment with calm precision. At 34, he was the seasoned diver, carrying more than a decade of cave experience. He had witnessed accidents before, some minor, others deadly. Cave diving wasn't just skill, it demanded control. One mistake, one rush of panic could seal a diver's fate. "Final check," Daniel said firmly. "You ready?" Michael drew a sharp breath, clutched his regulator, and nodded. "Yeah, let's go." Together they eased into the water, every motion steady and measured. Deep Sink stretched out beneath them like a gateway into another world. The entrance restriction, a narrow tunnel feeding into the main chamber, stood as their first trial. They slipped through with care, headlights cutting through the clouded dark. By the time they entered the junction room, visibility had collapsed. Silt, stirred by heavy rain, spun around them like an underwater storm. Their lights barely pierced beyond their arms. Every movement was cautious as they followed the guideline, a thin rope that was their only lifeline. In total darkness, losing it would be fatal. At the upper circuit line, the water cleared, revealing vast rock structures. They steadied themselves, corrected buoyancy, exchanged the familiar OK hand signal. Michael answered with confidence. He felt steady, ready. Together they pressed onward, descending the lower circuit line, deeper into the cave's heart. Dropping past 200 feet, the pressure became unmistakable. Each breath demanded effort, the air heavy in their lungs. But the danger was invisible. Nitrogen in their tanks seeped into their systems, clouding thought, dulling reflexes, and warping judgment. This was nitrogen narcosis, a silent, creeping haze, like intoxication at the bottom of the earth.
Most divers felt its effects below 130 feet, but beyond 200, it became dangerously unstable. Midway through the circuit, Daniel spotted something wrong. Michael had slipped just below the guideline. Only a few feet at first, but then he sank faster, as though pulled downward by a hidden weight. Daniel stretched out, trying to grab him, but Michael pushed forward, movement sharp and reckless. He was no longer tracking the line, he was driving beyond it. Was he chasing a personal depth milestone? Daniel's pulse quickened. They were already pushing 200, 250 feet, where the pressure crushed in like iron walls. The route would soon arc back toward the junction room, forcing them through the silted maze once again. But then it happened. Near the junction, the clear water collapsed. A heavy cloud of suspended silt rose around them, swallowing everything in darkness. Visibility fell to zero, an endless void. Michael reached for the line, but his hand slid past. He tried again, missed. Panic surged. Disoriented, he turned the wrong way, deeper into the cave instead of toward a stape. When Daniel entered the silt cloud, Michael had vanished. Meanwhile, Michael fought to survive. His chest hammered as he twisted through the darkness, searching for light, a rope, any landmark. The cave closed in around him. Then, a line appeared ahead, drifting in the gloom. He grabbed for it, unaware it led the wrong way. The rope pulled him into the downstream ballroom, a sealed chamber buried in the system. His body strained. At this depth, each breath burned. Carbon dioxide flooded his blood, a deadly effect of overexertion under crushing pressure. The harder he breathed, the worse it became. His regulator kept delivering air, but it couldn't stop the darkness closing in at the edges of his vision. This was a depth-induced blackout, one of the deadliest killers of deep divers. Then came the final mistake. His buoyancy slipped. His body tilted forward, weight pulling him down. He lost consciousness before ever touching the bottom. Meanwhile, Daniel surfaced. His lungs burned as he endured decompression stops, pausing at set depths to release nitrogen from his blood and avoid decompression sickness, known as the bends. This occurs when a diver rises too fast and nitrogen forms bubbles inside the body. At extreme pressure, nitrogen saturates tissues with every breath. If ascent is rushed, it doesn't escape safely. Bubbles erupt in joints, muscles, and vessels. The effects range from stabbing pain and dizziness to paralysis or even death in its worst form. To prevent this, divers make decompression stops, pausing at set depths so nitrogen can leave the body safely. Treatment often requires oxygen therapy or a hyperbaric chamber, simulating a slow, controlled ascent. At his 30-foot stop, Daniel hovered, peering into the abyss for Michael. Nothing. The realization hit hard. Something was terribly wrong. When Daniel surfaced, more divers had gathered. They re-entered the cave, tracing the guideline back to the junction room, but Michael was gone. The recovery began at dawn, and elite cave divers assembled, ready for the brutal task ahead. Given the depth and poor visibility, every move had to be precise. 3 teams, recovery divers, decompression specialists, and surface support, coordinated the descent. The cave was immense, and one stir of silt could turn it into a black void. As they pressed deeper, the cold and crushing pressure set in. At 200 feet, they switched to deep gas, eyes fixed on dive computers tracking depth, gas use, and decompression limits. Minutes dragged into hours as teams swept the tunnels. Then, at 241 feet, a diver's beam froze on a still figure. Michael lay face down on the floor, arms slack, regulator in place. His mask was intact, no damage, no panic. He had likely blacked out before he even knew he was in trouble. There were no signs of a fight. His body had simply shut down, drifting to the bottom with half a tank still left. It had taken 7 hours to find him, though they already knew the truth. What they feared was now real. Michael was gone. The rescue team secured his body and began the long ascent. The diving community mourned Michael's loss. He was young, skilled, and driven, sometimes too driven. Friends remembered how he pushed himself, determined to prove he could match the veterans. Experts later concluded nitrogen narcosis and depth-induced blackout, worsened by carbon dioxide from exertion, had likely overtaken him. Losing the guidelines sealed his fate. A mixed gas like trimix could have reduced narcosis, but Michael relied on compressed air, deadly beyond 200 feet. It wasn't a single mistake that killed him, but a chain of small errors compounded by the merciless pressure of the deep. Deep Sink had taken another life, and its black waters would hold their silence.
Jonathan Cole, 27, loved the thrill of exploring hidden places. His closest friend, 26-year-old Ferguson Lahar, often joined him underground. They caved before, but this one was different. Its twisting, unpredictable passages promised real danger, and that made it irresistible. Their trip began on a cool morning. Jonathan and Fergus hiked for miles through thick forest and over rugged stone until they reached the cave's mouth, a black opening carved into the cliffside, nearly lost among jagged rock. With headlamps cutting through the dark, they descended into the unknown. At first, the passage was wide enough to walk side by side. Soon it narrowed, forcing single file. The walls pressed closer, slick with moisture, the stone icy beneath their hands. With each step, the cave revealed its true nature, tight, unforgiving, and alive with hidden challenges. The tunnels twisted endlessly, some so narrow they had to turn sideways, stone pressing hard against their ribs. Still, they kept going, fueled by curiosity and the promise of discovery. Hours slipped by as they wormed through the winding rock. Conversation faded. Every ounce of focus went into navigating the shrinking space. Then they reached a fork. 2 narrow routes, one to the left and one to the right. After a quick debate, they chose the left, convinced it led to a hidden chamber others had described. The passage immediately tightened. They dropped to their stomachs, inching forward through the suffocating dark, bodies scraping against the cold stone. The ceiling pressed low, the walls so tight they scraped against their shoulders. Halfway through, Jonathan, leading the way, felt the passage pinch even smaller. He tried pushing forward, but the rock squeezed him still. Backing up was worse. The stone locked him in place. Panic hit hard as he shouted for Ferguson just a few feet behind. His voice echoed, tight and frantic.
Ferguson reached, but the crawl space was too narrow to help. Both men were trapped deep underground. No way ahead, no simple way back. The cave pressed on them like a crushing weight, squeezing the air from Jonathan's chest. Jonathan strained against the rock, muscles burning, but the stone's grip held firm. Each movement sent sharp jolts through his chest and shoulders. Hearing the fear in his friend's voice, Ferguson urged him to stay still, to save his strength. He promised to think of a way out, though the passage left no room to turn, no space to retreat. They were both locked inside a trap carved by the cave itself. Time dragged on. The cold deepened. The dark seemed heavier with every breath. They knew the truth. No one outside knew where they were. Rescue, if possible at all, was far beyond reach. They realized their mistake, ignoring the golden rule of caving. With only two, no one could stay behind while another went for help. In a desperate move, Ferguson tried pushing Jonathan forward, forcing him through the narrowing rock. But the tunnel was merciless, the stone biting deeper. Jonathan screamed as the walls tore at his clothes and skin, the crushing pressure unbearable. Out of options, Ferguson made the hardest choice. He told Jonathan he would try to back out and find help, though the odds were almost non-existent. Jonathan, his voice faint and broken, urged him to go. It was their only chance. With great effort, Ferguson began inching backward through the suffocating passage. Every movement was a battle, and the slow crawl felt endless. By the time he finally emerged from the cave, exhausted, scraped, and disoriented, the sun was already sinking below the horizon. Without wasting a moment, Ferguson contacted the rescue team. The nearest rangers, experienced men who knew the area well, were the first to respond. They gathered their gear and followed Ferguson back into the wilderness, determined to save Jonathan. But the cave's remoteness and the narrow, twisting tunnel made the rescue an uphill battle. Hours had passed since Ferguson had left Jonathan when the rescuers finally reached him. They found him unconscious, still wedged tightly in the unforgiving rock, but miraculously alive. Working carefully, they chipped away at the surrounding stone and secured hooks in place. Their plan was risky. Inject a glycerin solution to make Jonathan's body slippery, then attempt to haul him free with ropes. The pulling went on for what felt like forever, the rescuer straining with every ounce of strength. At last, Jonathan's body shifted, and with one final effort, he slid free from the tunnel's grip. He was rushed to the hospital, where weeks of recovery awaited him. But against all odds, Jonathan had survived the ordeal that nearly claimed his life.